Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 370 for the 3rd of Kislev in a leap year. I remember the first time that I became introduced to what's known as the scientific method. This was back when I was in school in Montreal in a pre-college, which is otherwise known as CEGEP, called Marianopolis. And I took a few courses which brought up the scientific method. One was the philosophy of science. Another was a statistic course. And this idea of the scientific method was recurring a lot. And we really got into what that means exactly. The scientific method has a long history, but it really became most popularized in the 1600s, and it developed over time. And the basic idea of the scientific method was to really try to, create a system for a lot of the scientific knowledge that was coming up to really make it a little bit more tight. It's like if we wanted to really explore gravity, for example, what is gravity? Does gravity really exist? It sort of gave this bounds, rules to test these kind of things. Nowadays, it's used for many different things to find, the effects of different drugs on health. Let's say smoking. Is it bad for you? Is it not bad for you, or whatever? And one of the core components that got added to the scientific method, which I found to be the most fascinating, was the concept of the Null Hypothesis. What is the Null Hypothesis? Well, okay, basically the way that it works, the way the scientific method works is let's say you want to go out and you want to explore, you want to see the effect of a certain action on health. So for example, let's say we wanted to study smoking, the effects of smoking on health, and wanted to see if smoking causes cancer, let's say. So that we would start with a hypothesis, and that hypothesis would be that smoking causes cancer, let's say. But then where the null hypothesis comes in is that in order to prove this, then the way we actually go about it is a little bit backwards, is that we actually want to create another hypothesis, which is called the null hypothesis, which posits that there's no relationship between these two things. So our hypothesis would be smoking causes cancer. The null hypothesis is that smoking does not cause cancer. And then we would have to go out and disprove the null hypothesis beyond reasonable doubt. So it's sort of basically, to explain this in layman's terms, what we're actually doing is we're saying that rather than proving that smoking causes cancer, because that's not really something we can ever fully prove, we are going to disprove that smoking does not cause cancer. And this might sound like we're just kind of saying the same thing, but it's actually profoundly different, because what we're actually saying is that, first of all, anything that we set out to prove, quote unquote, has to, by virtue of the fact that we want to prove it, it means that there needs to be a possibility that it can be disprovable. This is what distinguishes scientific facts from axioms, for example, which are more kind of we just accept them as fact. For example, that's a lot of things in math can fall into that category. 1 + 1 = 2 isn't really a scientific theory because it's not disprovable. It just is, and it's something we can all see and observe, and we take it as fact. But something like smoking causes cancer is disprovable theoretically, even though at this point it's sort of been, we've disproved the null hypothesis. We've disproved the fact that smoking does not cause cancer beyond a reasonable doubt at this point. And so what this is basically saying is that, first of all, anytime we want to prove anything, it must be perhaps paradoxically also disprovable in order to try to go out and prove it. And the second thing is that there's always a certain level of humility involved, because whenever we go and we, let's say you have a study like this and we disprove the null hypothesis beyond reasonable doubt, it's always still there and it always still remains as a very slight possibility. So as much research comes out about whether we're talking about, the theory of relativity, the theory of evolution, whether smoking causes cancer or not. We can do all these studies and we can continuously go out and try to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there is some kind of relationship there. However, the possibility that we're wrong always still remains. And this actually becomes very practical as we see through the years that there are times when many of these scientific studies are revisited and the null hypothesis actually does become proved, and we actually find out that we were wrong, that we were in error about a lot of these things. So why am I bringing all this up, and what does this have to do with the Tanya? Because this idea of the null hypothesis and why it fascinates me so much is because I think that the deep idea there and what it's teaching us really on a practical level is that we really should always remain humble and aware of how little we really know about anything. And we should never get so bold as to state we know this for certain, we know that for certain. There are very few things that we can say with certainty that we absolutely know, at least when it comes to intellectual or scientific based knowledge. And science itself, the scientific theory, understands this and posits this. And a true and scientist who abides by the scientific method will concede to this and will agree that anytime you have a theory, and even if you really, really strongly hold down to that theory, you have to understand that it is disprovable, which means in theory, at least, somebody could come out and disprove that theory. So again, the main point that I'm trying to bring out from here is this idea of the limits of our knowledge, is this acknowledgement of the limits of our knowledge and of our experience. And so the way that this relates to the Tanya and what we're going to be learning about today is in terms of relating to God in different ways. So we've been discussing this in this essay of Kuntres Acharon. We're in the middle of essay 4 of Kuntres Acharon, and we've been discussing different ways that we can connect to God. We can connect to God through learning Torah, right, which is a very intellectual endeavor indeed. We can connect to God through doing mitzvahs. That's another way that we can connect to God. And then we can connect to God through prayer. And each one of these things has a certain advantage and disadvantage over the other. So we've spoken already about the advantage that prayer has over the other two, because only prayer can actually change reality in a way that Torah and mitzvahs cannot. When we do Torah, when we learn Torah, or when we do perform mitzvahs, we're connecting to God in a very intense way, but we're not actually changing anything in the evolution of creation, so to speak. However, today we're actually going to be focusing on mitzvahs, and we're going to begin to discuss the advantage that mitzvahs have over prayer and Torah study. Focusing on prayer, not so much in terms of the effects that it has on the world, but in terms of the more internal connection that it's generating within us and God. So tomorrow we're really going to get into the specific, the unique connection that mitzvahs give us over and above Torah and prayer. But today, in introduction to that, we're going to talk about the limits of Torah study and prayer, and why Torah study and prayer, as great as they are, they do entail a certain limitation to them by virtue of the fact that they are tied to our subjective minds and our subjective experience and how much we understand. Which is why there's a principle that if you're in the middle of learning Torah, or you're in the middle of praying even, and a mitzvah comes up that only you can do and cannot be done by anybody else, you are required to stop learning Torah or even stop praying and go and do this mitzvah. And the reason for this, in short, is because learning Torah and praying, as much as these things are very great things, they're very limited to you and your experience and your understanding of godliness. It's a subjective experience that's limited to you as a person, versus when you do a mitzvah, you're actually tapping into something that is way beyond you. That's actually, as we'll learn more tomorrow, something that's a more universal kind of energy that allows you to transcend yourself. Mitzvahs, interestingly enough, by virtue of the fact that they're actually involved, when we do mitzvahs, we involve ourselves in external things in the world, actually give us the ability to tap into and connect with God in a more internal way, versus when it comes to learning Torah or praying, we only are able to connect to godliness in a more external way. So the way that Alter Rebbe explains this, and again, for context, we're still in the middle of essay 4 of Kuntres Acharon, is he begins by, first of all, reminding us of this precept, which is taught in the Gemara in Moed Katan, page 9a, that that if a mitzvah comes up that cannot be done by anybody else, then we stop learning Torah, even if we're learning about Ma'aseh Merkava, which Ma'aseh Merkava is a very lofty Kabbalistic topic, which is based on this description that's given in Cheskel, chapter 1, of this like chariot that's above, and it's a very lofty thing. So even if we're learning like the loftiest aspects of Torah, basically, the Alter was saying, we still need to stop learning that if a mitzvah comes up that cannot be done by anybody else but us. So too, even in terms of praying. Which is when somebody's praying, then they're in a state, hopefully, of a state like of a very intense, intellectually generated love and fear of God. Like that's like a higher level of prayer, that we're not just praying out of an innate love and fear of God, but we actually have generated an intellectually generated love and fear of God. So even if a person's in that state of prayer, they still need to stop praying in order to do a mitzvah that cannot be done by anybody else. So why? Why is this? So the Alter Rebbe says it's actually been already explained above. So if you go back to yesterday's episode, at the end of yesterday's episode, we spoke about the fact that mitzvahs, they are the whole purpose of creation, because the whole purpose of creation is to elevate and rectify those sparks that fell during the shattering of the vessels. We explained all of that yesterday, right? And that can only really be done fully through mitzvahs, through actually performing mitzvahs. And that's the whole point of creation. So it's sort of like, yes, Torah study, prayer, those are both really great things, but your actual, like, what is God's actual, like, what's our mission here on earth is to do mitzvahs. And not only is it just like, okay, that's our mission on earth, so that's what we need to do. But in fact, says the Alter Rebbe, there's actually the performance of actual physical, practical mitzvahs, as well as learning about them, like what you need to do in a practical way. They actually have a great advantage over the intellect, over the mind, which is involved in the love and fear of God, intellectual love and fear of God. Because, so why is this? What's the advantage? So first of all, so now the Alter Rebbe is going to get a little bit into this connection to God through our minds and through our intellectually generated emotions that we can get. So while it's true that we find in Devarim, chapter 11, verse 22, it says, "Uledafka bo," and to cleave to God. So meaning to say that we're supposed to cleave to God. And the way we cleave to God is to cleave to his midos, to his character traits. And the way we do this is through intellectually generating this love and fear of God, like to try to become more godly kind of people, right? So when we do this, and so for example, like if, we know that like when we learn about God's attributes, we know like God has an attribute of kindness, of giving. So we want to become more giving people and have this more giving nature. He's a compassionate God. So we want to develop more compassion within ourselves. Still, when we do this, when we like try to emulate God in these kind of ways, like in an emotional kind of way, we're not actually, like, we don't want to kid ourselves and think that we're actually cleaving to God's attributes in a true way, like in terms of the essence of these attributes, but rather we're cleaving to the existence of these attributes. So these are terms in Chassidus that come up, the difference between the Metzios and the Mahus. Metzios is like the existence of the thing, and the Mahus is the essence of the thing. So it's sort of like if you think about anything, like let's say if you have like an apple. So it's like there's the existence of the apple. So it's like you see, an apple is a type of fruit and it has like different things or whatever. But then there's like the essence of the apple, which is much more than just like the different characteristics of the apple itself. It's sort of hard to describe this, but everything in the world has an existence to it, and then it has an essence of what that is. And so too with God. So it's like when we connect to God, when we try to emulate God's attributes, we're doing this, and it's sort of like if somebody were to, like we have like nowadays, you have like people who are trying to create artificially generated meat. So it's like they're taking all the characteristics of the meat and they're coming up with like pretty good results, right? But it's not meat, even if it has all of the chemical, replications of the meat and every aspect of it. It looks like meat. It smells like meat. Everything about it really seems like meat. It's not actually meat. It's like the essence of it is not just meat. So it's a replica of meat. So similarly with us, when we emulate God's attributes, it's great because we're supposed to do that and we want to be as godly as possible. But we nevertheless need to realize that we are replicas of God. We're not actually tapping into God in an essential way. It's more in just like an existence way. We're acknowledging the existence of God. And we see that there's an allusion to this where Avraham Avinu called himself Ve'anochi Afar Ve'efer. That's from Bereshit chapter 18 verse 27, where he called himself, I am dust and ashes. So we had a whole other episode about this quite a while ago. If you want to look it up, I don't remember offhand which it was. We talked about this. What did Avraham mean when he said, I am dust and ashes? And what he meant by that is that like, just like a tree, like when the tree burns, it eventually, like what's left of the tree is the ashes. Even though, yes, the ashes contain within it the entirety of the tree, nobody would look at the ashes and say, oh, that's a tree. It's a different thing, even though, yes, essentially it kind of is, but it is the tree in a very external way. We spoke about how, like, in terms of the elements of creation, so there's earth, water, fire, and air. So a tree, as an actual tree, has all of those elements within it and manifests very truly. And then if it's just burnt down to the ashes, then all that's left is the earth element of the tree. So it's kind of like a very diluted kind of form of the tree. So that's the illusion. That's how Avraham Avinu saw himself, is that as much as he emulated the attribute of kindness, he was very humble and he was very aware of the fact that as much as he was the epitome, the archetype of kindness, he was really just like ashes to a tree compared to God's actual attribute of kindness. And so this is the same thing when we talk about the infinite light of God. It says about it, lit machshavat tfisa bei. There's no thought that can comprehend it, no thought that can understand God's light and the radiance that comes from out of God's light. So all we can do, we can't actually grasp the essence of God. What we can do is we can grasp the existence of God. We can say, okay, there's this thing called God, right? We can't really, as much as we learn Chassidus from today to tomorrow or whatever, it's all kind of like we're skirting around that null hypothesis in a way. It's like we're saying what God is not in a weird way. Like we're saying, like, yes, all these aspects that we're learning in Chassidus, these are like giving us like a semblance of God, but we're also saying this isn't the full God. This isn't the full thing. We're acknowledging that we don't know the full story. Just like Lahavdil in a scientific method, more, facts and details are coming out all the time that add to what we know, but we always say we don't fully know everything. And this isn't just true for humans. It's actually true for supernal beings as well. That what do supernal beings say? The angels above say, specifically the seraphim in the world of Bria, is they say, as is quoted in Yeshayahu chapter 6, verse 3, Kadosh, 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 Hashem tzvakot, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. So this word Kadosh, holy, it means holy, but it also means separated, separate. There's an acknowledgement there that we are separate. These angels have this humility to recognize the fact that they are separate from God and they're very far from God. And they recognize the fact that they cannot grasp God fully. The only beings that can grasp God are those which are considered netzalim. Netzalim means emanated. So those are the ones in the world of Atzilus. So in the world of Atzilus, where everything is one and unified, then yes, those beings there, because we can't even call them beings. They're not actually separate beings. They are just like emanations from their source. So those emanations are very much aware of their source because they're not separate at all, just like we've likened it to in terms of pregnancy, the level of Atzilus would be like the potential for the child within the mother before it's actually, there's been conception happen at all, like the egg, maybe we can say. So a woman and her eggs are really one and the same, and the eggs they do experience the essence of the mother. They're one with the experience of the essence of the mother. But the second there's a conception there, then there's a separation. There's like this child, even if it's just literally like, a little zygote, like that's all it is this little teeny little thing. That is something separate from both the mother and the father. So, but when it comes to emanated beings, so the way that Eitz Chaim describes it, the Eitz Chaim describes this idea of the partsufim. This is literally means like faces or visages. Like basically, these are how the partsufim manifest. These are how the spheros manifest within the world of Atzilus, and they're all interconnected. They have no identity of their own, just like the eggs inside of the mother or the sperm inside the father before the conception happens. But this is not the case for created beings, even if we're talking about the souls of Atzilus, because even if you could say, okay, what about like, there are certain very, very, very lofty people in the world whose souls originate from Atzilus once they become manifest down here in this physical world. So even though, yes, the origin of their souls in the world of Atzilus, now they're found here in this physical world, and thus now they are considered to be creations, and thus they don't have that same connection to essence like those beings within Atzilus itself is. And we see, for example, Moshe Rabbeinu. So we see that that God told Moshe Rabbeinu, and this is found in Shemot chapter 33, verse 22. He said to him, "You will see my hinder part." So even Moshe Rabbeinu, who is this, the greatest prophet that ever lived, who most likely was from a soul of Atzilus, he was only able to experience the external aspect of God. In other words, the Mitzvahs of God, the existence of God. Why? Because he was down here in this physical world, and that's all we can experience. So that's the end of the section today. So just to really sum it up, the point of today is to kind of make us recognize the limits of our intellect, the limits of our ability to connect to God through our own minds, through our own understanding, which is what we do when we pray, and which is what we do when we learn Torah. And so tomorrow we're going to get into mitzvahs, and we're going to see how mitzvahs allow us to break through this limitation, because there's something specific about mitzvahs that break us out of our own intellectual conceptions. It's not about how much you know, it's about what you do. And through that action, through that doing, that allows us to connect to God's essence in a way that nothing else can. So stay tuned, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.